Alright guys, Red here. Today we're going to be looking at what changes I've made to the binds for my setup in STAR-ZYWM. To most people, binds are a very personal thing, but if you would prefer to just copy something that works already, or are just looking for suggestions, then hopefully this video will help. Before we begin, I'd like to go over something real quick. If you're new to this sort of thing, if you come into options and then go to controls, this is where you will want to come if you need to invert any of your axis controls. It's also where you will come if you would like to play around with the curve sensitivity of any of those as well. How it works is you come to this bottom corner and you can cycle through your available inputs. So you would go to keybinds, set this to joystick HOTAS, then hit advanced controls. Then you would find the axis that you would want to invert. Say you wanted to change pitch here, it says it's on input 4. So you come back to the controls tab and change this to HOTAS 4. Then go to the inversion settings, flight movement, and there's flight pitch there. This works the same for sensitivity and dead zones as well. Make sure the correct device is selected in the corner. For me, I like to leave pitch yaw and roll with a flat diagonal line, but I do add a bit of curve to strafe forward, back, up, down, left and right. This allows me to make small movements with a lot more precision, and when I really want to move fast, well then I'm usually locked out anyway, so I need less control over the higher ranges. I normally set this to around 2 for each of these, but obviously feel free to set them however you feel comfortable. Dead zones can be handy as well if your sticks are starting to get a bit imprecise or you're noticing some drift when you should be sitting still. Basically just keep adding dead zone until that stops happening, or if you can, recalibrate your sticks. Right, into the binds. We're going to start here on the right and go left. We'll cover a lot of the general stuff and combat first, and then we'll come back and do salvage and mining as well. Okay, so on the right stick, this two-way hat around here on the top will now toggle pip combination type. So if you don't know what that means, when you point at a target you have a bunch of circles that tell you where each gun will roughly hit, or you can toggle this and it will reduce the amount of circles into where each weapon type will hit. So if you have all the same weapons, it should be one circle basically. Down on this toggles precision lines. These basically tell you what roll orientation your ship should be in to get the majority of shots on target. Or at least that's what it seems. Could be pretty useful, I'm still playing around with this one. This hat here is the main targeting control. So center press is to toggle lock on whatever I'm looking at with head tracking. Pressing it again will unlock. However, it's quite intuitive in how it works. If I look away from the target and click it, it will unlock. If I look at a different target, it will lock that instead, which is perfect. So it locks and unlocks on the same button, but it's basically context sensitive. Holding down on the down direction will pin or unpin a target. So if you go into a group and you wanted to mark a particular threat, or perhaps your objective target, you can simply pin them and then a normal press on down again will lock that target no matter where you're looking. Right and left here, cycle through subsystems, which is pretty important these days. Maybe you want to just disable some guns or engines. The reason I use two binds, left and right, is because sometimes there are loads of sub-targets, so cycling through in one direction can be a nightmare, especially if you cycle past the target you're looking for. Although I did notice that sometimes it will only cycle through so many components, and as far as I can tell, it seems to be based on where your reticule is currently pointing. Not sure what's going on there, but especially on bigger ships I'm not getting a full cycle through all the parts. Double click on left here will reset to target the whole ship. Up on here is nearest attacker. Double press on this will give you nearest enemy, so that will include ships that aren't currently attacking you. This black button here will bring up the new precision mode. Precision mode also has a zoom as well, and that can be done by pulling this pinky trigger here. When not in precision mode, this trigger will just zoom normally. This hat here is the power triangle. So up, down, left, right will correspond to the direction of power in the game, and down will equalise them. Center press on this will activate scanning, and scanning mode is toggled with this pinky button round the back. The red button here will put you into missile mode, and will activate the red LEDs as well, just as a further reminder. If you'd like to know how to do this, I'll be doing another video as a follow-up guide where we'll cover LEDs, the access to button, and how to get the toe brakes on the pedals to activate boost and brake, which is a particular pain. When in missile mode, this scroll wheel will select the amount of missiles, and the press will cycle to the next missile type. Moving down to the thumb rest hat, Left will cycle fire mode between staggered and combined. Right will toggle lead lag pips. Up is for deploying flares. Tapping this will release 1 and holding it will release an amount depending on how long it's held. Down will deploy noise. Center click will set to fixed gimbal and long press will set to manual gimbal. You might be wondering why I've split the pip control between here and here. The reason for that is you need to take your finger off the trigger. I normally try to keep related functions grouped together, but it didn't make sense here because when you're actively shooting someone, it's far easier to hit noise, flare, gimbal, lead lag, etc. with your thumb, whereas precision lines and pip combination type I personally assigned less importance during a battle and might be something you'd rather adjust before going in or when you get a second during the fight. This analog controls the external camera. This is pitch, roll and twist is yaw. The only thing left is the trigger. First stage does nothing, for combat at least, but the second stage will fire weapons group 1 and drop bombs, and hold will fire missiles. Over to the second stick, and the trigger second stage will fire weapons group 2. This top left hat deals with a lot of external ship stuff, so up is enable VTOL, down is for the landing gear, center press will cycle the ship's configuration, so we'll deploy wings or extend cargo spindles or whatever. Left is for the ship's lights. Right would be good for toggle doors open and closed or perhaps unlock ship components so they can be removed. By the way, if you find you're struggling to fit everything you want in, there's also quite a few softwares out there that you can use that set up some of your buttons as modifiers. The idea being that when you activate one, it will essentially free up all your buttons again as another new bind to be used. Handy if you would prefer to have everything on twin sticks and just cycle through modifiers for a full range of abilities. Joy to key is a good one I've heard, I'll put a link to that below. So this red button will be our decoupled toggle. Again, this enables the red lights to serve as a reminder and to try and help avoid accidents. Underneath that we have what is now our main mode switcher. So I've tried to reduce this into an economical amount of buttons as possible in a way that still makes sense. So a center long press will toggle master modes between nav and combat, and it will default to quantum. If you short press the center click again, it will take you from quantum into normal flight. Pressing up will enable the quantum mode again, and holding up will engage the QT drive. So with just 2 buttons we can switch master modes, select flight or quantum, and engage the quantum drive. Pressing right on this will toggle either salvage mode or mining mode. Left for now will bring up the map, but the plan is for that to become something to do with requesting a jump when the jump gates become active. This black button will enable and disable the speed limiter. The speed limiter is adjusted using this analog stick here, up and down. This basically just means you can preset the speed instead of adjusting it here on the fly. Less relevant with combat speeds being forced now, but it can still be useful for up close with asteroids and salvage and stuff. The thumb rest hat basically deals with a lot of handy toggles, so back will toggle auto precision mode. This is what slows you down when you extend landing gear now. And I should say I've tried my best to use the actual description used for each bind, so it's easier to find in the settings. Right on this will toggle gravity compensation, which will work in decouple mode now as well. Forward is a trim setting, push to set and long push to disable. This is based on your throttle, so if you put your input to halfway and hit this, it will try and maintain that for you. For years I've used a cruise control, and if you prefer to use that then you could set that here, and if you do, the speed adjustment is automatically tied to the speed limiter controls. But I found just having 2 bound was pretty pointless, and preferred the new throttle trim, especially since you can no longer use cruise to leave your chair whilst keeping your ship moving. If you know a way around that though, I am all ears. Left on here will request landing, and center press will recenter track IR, which is basically just head tracking through an external program. This scroll wheel will change the radar ping angle. Round the back we have the tiny little pinky button which actually pings the radar, and the 2-way up top is to change to external camera by pressing up, and holding down is to look behind. The main forward and back axis here, forward is strafe down and back is strafe up. Took a while to get used to, but I highly recommend it, as having such a long throw on your vertical movement is an absolute game changer. And left and right strafe is left and right on the axis. Forward and back thrust is controlled by the pedals, and the right toe is boost and the left toe is brake. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that takes a little messing around to get to work, because you don't want to be engaging brake or boost accidentally by just resting your foot on the pedals. And it would be good for you to be able to just rest your foot naturally and comfortably. Also, STAR-ZYWM will only recognise a button for one of those as an input as well. So like I say, I'll cover it fully in another video, but essentially you want to take the last 5% of the axis and convert that to trigger a button type input. Then you have to temporarily invert the axis so the button is right at the start of the press instead of the very end. If you don't do that, STAR-ZYWM will keep registering the axis as the input you're trying to bind instead of the button. And when you finally get it, you need to flip the axis back again. It's very tricky to pull off, but if you're interested in getting that functional, check the channel, or I'll put a card at the end of this vid in a few days hopefully. So essentially, I played around for a few months trying out different combinations of these axes, trying to see what I like best, which sometimes isn't obviously apparent. I tried to give things a good try and work up some muscle memory before making a solid decision. That ended up being something that wasn't entirely comfortable straight away. I started with the pedals on yaw like a helicopter or plane basically, because that's what I was used to. The left stick was on forward and back. But when I tried the pedals for forward and back, I knew it was going to be really good. But that meant getting used to up and down strafe being forward and back on that left stick. And it was a very big challenge for a long time. Before I had the pedals, I tried variations of the two pinky triggers controlling forwards and back, and the left stick being forward and back, with the pinkies doing up and down. So that's definitely worth exploring for the folks with two sticks, because a lot of control was definitely possible that way. Okay, so I've got a few things related to mining and salvage I want to go over that are all on these two sticks, and then I'll cover what's all being put on the throttle or on the pad there. So if you're in a reclaimer and you're scraping with your single seat laser, second stage trigger will activate your beam. The bind for that will be called toggle fire focused. To cycle the focused salvage modifiers, so to swap between beam types and tractor etc, I press the left trigger second stage. So that one fires the beam, that one changes it. For in the Vulture, it's just the same, because I was never really using one beam at a time, it was always focused. But if I need to change the modifiers for each side, they are over here on white, left and right. This button will switch the salvage beam axis, so from horizontal to vertical and back. Middle on this will toggle salvage mode gimbal, which allows you to independently control where the beam points using either your head or mouse with look controls. Really fast way to get a sore neck I found, don't recommend it really. The slider here will adjust the absolute beam spacing, so how far the beams are apart. This wheel is supposed to control the tractor beam distance, but for some reason I can't get it to work even with the mouse, so maybe it doesn't work currently. For the munching, I've put toggle fire fracture on the first stage of the right trigger, and toggle fire disintegrate on the first stage of the left trigger. Basically just trying to get both sticks involved in the salvage process. And it feels really cool, and I'm liking it a lot. For mining, it's roughly the same setup. First trigger stage on the right is fire mining laser, and first stage on the left is switch mining laser. Laser power is controlled with this axis here. Activate mining module 1, 2 and 3 are on here, just where the salvage ones would be, and jettison cargo is on this red switch here. Bear in mind that when you're in mining mode, a lot of your other ship functions are disabled. So if you're running with two sticks, then I'd probably use this top right targeting hat, left, middle and right for modules 1, 2, 3, and up and down for laser power. So that should cover a lot of the basic functions that I normally prefer to have in my hands at all times. When we move over to the throttle, there's quite a few things that I feel are pretty surplus to requirement, but just cool to have if you have the extra inputs. So these red switches are self-destruct. By default, the button is in the down state, so putting it up won't actually do anything, you have to put it back down, which gives it two stages and prevents accidental input. That's eject and that's jettison cargo. This one will bring your flight systems online, and that's just a toggle up and toggle down to put them off again. The bind is called power on. These three silver ones are for weapons, thrusters and shield, so on is up and off is down. On the coloured buttons, for white we have enter turret 1, 2, 3 along the bottom, and the top 3 are for mining and salvage modules. Blue deals with a lot of docking and auto docking request, auto land stuff that pretty much hardly ever used. Green is open all doors, close all doors, unlock and lock doors, not sure if that one even works, and open all component ports and lock component ports. And yellow is for controlling shields, so forward, back, left, right, top, bottom. And reset is somewhere weird and it really annoys me, this one, but I think it's this button here. I'd have preferred to just be double tap here, but Star Citizen done Star Citizen. The dial will change the bombing HUD range, more and less, and reset as a push. And this one is increase and decrease the scanning angle on the scanner. Over here we have this thing on the pad called Matric, M-A-T-R-I-C, which basically converts presses into keybinds and macros. Now I've not updated this one for a while, but I'm sure it only cost me around £5. You can download templates or use someone else's from the community page, or you can do what I've done here and just make your own from scratch. You can even go into someone else's and use their buttons and assets to mix things up into one of your own style. As you can see, I got pretty carried away. This took me ages, to be honest. I ended up taking and shading 3D printing files for some of these covered buttons. This ended up being like a 2-stage button with each stage animated. But a lot of them have fallen out of use in favour of physical buttons elsewhere, which is a shame. Wipe visor, equip helmet, there's an emote page here with all the emotes. Customise weapon, inspect, drop, attachments, fire mode. This will take you to the RSI website. You can have 3 different camera views saved here, and you can jump between them using these. Weapon 0. This used to be eject and jettison cargo. Here we've got some comm controls, and they all do something, light up in some way. These are Spotify controls. This whole section controls the camera basically, so this part here is basically a giant trackpad that will let me smoothly track the camera. Basically it just emulates the mouse. Zoom in, zoom out, depth of field, FOV, etc. All the camera controls basically. This is just for different websites, so this is Erco Games. Global and proxy chat, video recording functions, screenshots. This hazard sign puts up a med beacon. You get the idea. Just useful stuff I'd rather not remember all the keybinds for. A couple of notable changes and things that I'll likely add to this is repooling magazines is now a thing. You can do that by pressing Alt+1. And toggling your helmet now works pretty reliably too, so have a play around with that. I'll put a link to this in the description below if that's got your interest. And that's all I've got, guys. Hopefully that helped you out in some way, or at the very least gave you a few ideas. Please feel free to ask any questions at all. I'd like to say a big thank you to the channel members Nils Gerdes, Spacecraft, and our newest member Thomas in London. I really do appreciate your guys' support. If you know anyone looking to get into Star Citizen, please consider using one of the codes on screen now for some extra starting credits. If you'd like to become a member and get your referral code displayed and bag yourself some extra entries into any giveaways we do, you can do that by hitting the join button underneath this video or on the Patreon link in the description. Thanks for watching. 07 guys.